I watched Black Widow with a lot of trepidation. I was pleasantly surprised. It's a lot better than I expected. Now, I'm still going to give it a fairly low grade. It's going to be a 6.5. I'm not even going to say it's a strong 6.5, so I wouldn't recommend paying full price because I have issues with the writer who was behind Black Widow, and she's terrible. And she did Captain Marvel, and this shows she has almost no growth as a writer. But there are the writers. The direction was okay. And there were aspects I thought were really strong, like cinematography. So it actually does stick out from most Marvel movies. So this is going to be a somewhat short video, but I'll do something more in depth on the MCU down the line. Unfortunately, I keep getting into arguments with people, and I realize I shouldn't do that, but sometimes you have to correct people. And I think I'm pretty accurate. For the most part, provide references, but people want references on everything. It's like, well, you can't get everything you want. I'll do more in-depth things in terms of trying to provide a scale or rank, because I'm sure some people are curious, well, where exactly are you coming from if you reject, the usual way of doing things? And I think Black Widow, is a nice place to begin. So on the one hand, people are already attacking this for ripping off Civil War and a lot of other MCU movies, but I actually thought it took too much from X-Men 2. I'm essentially the bad guy, Stryker, and he even does the same thing as Stryker. He does mind control. There, it's mind controlling mutants. Here, it's mind controlling women with a lot of athletic prowess. It also does a lot of things from X-Men 2 and sort of just splitting people up and then bringing them together. And the kind of backstory, too, is sort of like giving us a confused protagonist is kind of the same thing. I'm shocked that now the MCU is literally ripping off Marvel films not in the MCU. Like non-MCU Marvel films are what they're taking from. I even found this one moment at the end basically taken from RoboCop too. So it's like line between a bad movie and a good movie is very, very murky, and there is a middle space, and this operates in that middle space. It's a mediocre film. For an MCU film, this is above average, but as a film unto itself, I can see why people think it's bad, and I can see emphasizing its bad points. But the way some people are describing it, it's so insanely terrible and just filled with endless plot holes, and it's just annoying, and it's, whatever, woke, and it's this, and it's that, and it's like, that's just not an accurate description. It's not very imaginative, and for the most part, it is very lazy. And yes, there are plot holes here and there, but I didn't think it was super terrible. And again, I'm not an MCU fanboy, so I'm very disillusioned with how Ken Feige doesn't really respect the characters, doesn't really understand the comics, doesn't really care about good storytelling. So I'm actually sympathetic to the criticisms of the MCU as a whole, but I have to be honest, I thought this was going to be a 2 out of 10. The way it was being described and reviewed elsewhere, and it's like, no, it's not that. It is a lot better than people say it is. That said, it has a lot of issues, and the basic premise is really too thin. So basically, Natasha discovers she has a sister, the sister needs help, and away she goes, and it's like, well, wait a minute, she didn't tell Captain America about this? Because this is supposed to take place after Civil War, and the way they're trying to explain it is, well, she's on the run, she can't ask for help. Like, really? Because all she needs is Ant-Man or Hawkeye, and she could solve like 80% of the issues in this film, but she just chooses not to reach out for help because, reasons, I guess. And of course, the main problem here is Taskmaster. Now, one Taskmaster is being visualized and shown. It's very well done. It's very sleek. It's very stylish. The stunt works are pretty average. It's not as good as the Jason Bourne series, so it's not going to match that. But onto themselves, I thought they were fine. The performances are pretty good. I thought actually Rachel is probably the best acting out of all. I know a lot of people said that Pugh is pretty good. I thought she was fine. The jokes are very, very erratic. I actually found them more funny, I guess, than most people, but they are kind of unrelenting, and they needed to stop and just have more quiet moments. But it is what it is. It's an MCU film, so they just have relentless jokes, and it got tiresome after a while. And the central twist is way too stupid, and they pulled this trick too many times before on so many occasions. So first, they character assassinate Black Widow by having her kill a small girl. And then, of course, being an MCU film, they're going to take it back, but the way they take it back is so insanely crude. And you give them points for being creative at the end, the way Natasha basically has to hurt herself to win, but it doesn't feel realistic, and it doesn't look right, because basically she damages a body part, but you can clearly see the body part is not damaged. So you're like, what was the point of that? Again, overall, weak storytelling, but good stunt work, music is okay, nice location shots, cinematography is very beautiful, it has a really great style to it, and, it does get the job done in terms of getting from A to B. Like now, Natasha's powers don't make any sense. She's insanely overpowered in this one. She basically seems to have the super soldier serum, though that's a little weird. But overall, is it a good popcorn flick? Yeah, it gets the job done in terms of being an entertaining kind of backstory to Black Widow, but doesn't give us enough to really say, wow, this is a great film. However, I do think they laid down the foundations for an interesting trilogy. I would be genuinely curious if Scarjo comes back and does more with Black Widow, so they at least make me curious to explore more of her story. I just think they chose really the wrong time period. Like, putting this after Civil War just creates a lot of continuity and logical problems. They just do really outrageous dialogue that does not sound like the character. So there's just so many annoying little things that's going to bring down the score. But if you can just ignore some of the stupid stuff, and there is a lot of stupid stuff, I'm not going to lie, it's not as horrifically bad as the critics say it is, but it's not as great as the admirers say. Some people are already saying this is one of the best Marvel films, which that might be true, but that's not saying anything. So saying this is one of the best MCU films is like, that doesn't mean anything. So it's not as good as the admirers say, and it's not as bad as the critics say. It's sort of in the middle. A 6.5, but an enjoyable 6.5. It doesn't give us that much great Black Widow, but at least you get a little some greatness here and there. But it's very sprinkled throughout in very small doses. So it's a fairly good film, but I can't justify paying full price. But if you want to rent it later, I'd say, yeah, it's probably going to be worth the price. And it does provide you a few more details about the MCU. And that's the best I can do with Black Widow in this non-spoiler discussion. Thank you for listening.